And a great way to just put into motion the things that we hear about on Sunday. That's what we talk about each week on the program. And the first thing I wanted to ask you, Cole, a pretty serious question. The garment that you are wearing today, that's some kind of graduation ceremony piece, what do you call that?
I call it a hood,
okay.
A master's hood. So that came from where I graduated at Trinity Evangelical Community School. So the colors were blue and red.
I thought maybe I could function as your agent, get you a graduation speaking event for next year.
I'm always open. You see 30,000 institutions.
There's opportunity there.
Someone needs someone.
Yeah, they're overlooking you. We can do something about this. Maybe something big here. So you know, not the real big graduation ceremony. Sure. Work into the big
practice.
Yeah. So we're 31 weeks into the book of Romans here. We're wrapping it up.
I think this was number 32.
This was 32. So the one question I had for you is it's fascinating to watch God's timing. And was there any, because these get planned way in advance of when you're actually doing these sermons. So was there something that came to mind, or maybe a few events that happened where God's timing just really, you could see it? Like we did a sermon on this subject and these passages, it was planned way in advance and it was really needed that it was this week. Did anything like that?
Yeah. There were a number of times in Romans where we were preaching and it was like, my goodness, the timing of this. Like when we were talking back in the fall about sexuality, the brokenness of our sexual beings. It's like, this is what culture is talking about. You know? So that was like really interesting timing. We then have conversations about, Romans 13 being subject to governing authorities. And that's in the midst of all of this talk about wearing masks or not and presidential elections. And so, yeah, the timing is ordained. And it's really interesting how it strikes our congregation in those moments.
Yeah, and you said something, I think, at the end of the service about how this changed you. And I was thinking there are a couple things that just were great reminders that I needed to get more serious about certain things in my life. And one thing that we did, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, we got involved in Life Group, we started that. Another thing, you're talking about the election, is I remember texting you that I realized I need to pray for these earthly leaders, whether I like them or I don't like them, whether I agree or I don't agree. So now I try to set aside time on Monday to pray for the leaders.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, just watching kind of Romans unfold and Paul talking about the gospel, you can't miss it. It's almost on every page. But then really, how do we live that out every day? And I think Jerry Bridges says it well, that we need to preach the gospel to ourselves every day. That's what really stood out to me. It's like, oh yeah, I mean, I need the gospel in my brain every day.
Just a reminder of what Jesus did for us.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's easy to say, oh, that's something I did. That's something other kids do. But no, the gospel, it never gets old. And that story of amazing grace, we need to, realize that each and every day.
Yeah, and we've talked about being in the Word daily and different ways we can do that. And I wanted to ask you, though, about, you have to help me with the quote from Spurgeon about faith and obedience, about how that works hand in hand, and what we can do on the faith side so that our obedience gets better.
Yeah. I think that obedient faith that Paul talks about at the beginning of Romans and then at the end is this daily submission to the gospel and to God's word, and to really being open to saying, okay, by the Spirit that indwells my life, how can I be obedient? And that calls us into lots of areas where we don't. Romans 7 says we want to fight against that. And so we want to do the things we technically don't want to do, the things we don't want to end up doing, that whole battle.
Yeah.
And so then it's like, okay, how do I live this out? And so it really does mean a simple obedience to the things of God. And that's hard.
It sounds like the first two steps then help the third.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. I think when we're preaching the gospel to ourselves and then we're in God's word, we are now set to have that kind of obedient faith. Yeah, I think Paul strung that together in a very interesting way.
Yeah. All right, well, Cole, thanks again for your time and doing this. And I hope you guys will find a way to apply today's sermon in your next move.